What's going on with what the games they're playing out there, Courtney, with Lamar Jackson? I mean, John Harbaugh stepped to the podium 2 weeks ago, or 10 days ago, 11 days ago after their last game, and said he'll be back after the bye. He keeps hinting that, but then there's others in the space like Dan Graziano reporting he's hearing he might not be back this weekend. What do you think?
Yeah, so today's important because they practiced Monday and there was no injury report because it was an extra day that they had coming off the bye, and he wasn't out there. So you question, if he can't be out there for the light practice, what's it going to look like when they're in pads this week? So I think today is the day to circle. If Lamar Jackson can get out there, if he's limited, that's one thing. If he's not out there at all, it's trending towards him not playing, because he has not been somebody who has wanted to push through these hamstring injuries. He's had them before. I think that it's something when you're a quarterback and when you move around as much as he does, you've got to really take that. You've got to be judicious with that. So I think today's the day that you circle, and we're all going to be waiting for that injury report 4 or 5 o'clock whenever they get done with practice. And if he's not out there, then you're planning it's probably whoever's going to be backing him up. I don't know if they stick with Cooper Rush. It didn't look good the last time that they had him as the backup quarterback.
Yep.
Snoop Huntley makes a lot more sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know if it's gamesmanship or if his body truly isn't ready, because he injured that hamstring against the Chiefs a couple weeks ago. He just, they're a 1-5 team. Do you really want to risk coming back for, you're in the midst of a losing season. It might still be a losing season, whether he's there or not. I think that's something that he has to consider.
What does Ben Johnson feel best about right now with his offense?
The run game, certainly the run game, because that's been consistent the last 2 weeks after they had struggled to get it going. And it carried the load for a struggling passing game. Like, he was not, the passing game left a lot to be desired against the Saints. And some of that was Caleb Williams not being as decisive as he needed to be, holding onto the ball too long, not scrambling. I mean, that was, the biggest miss. And Caleb admitted that he probably should have run a couple times after the game. But I think what you're seeing from DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai last week was the closest to it looking like a version of what Ben had in Detroit in terms of the usage than it has all year. So for somebody who is he spends so much more time with the run game during the week in the game plan there than the passing game. And he talked about it before Washington, how personally he takes those struggles because he's pouring so much of himself into it. That's got to be the part that you feel the best about, given the ups and downs elsewhere, particularly with your quarterback.
Yeah. Will Austin Booker be back this week?
Sounds like they're trending. I mean, if they don't get him back soon, and I have to figure out what the exact date is, he stays on IR for the rest of the season.
Right.
They can't bring him back.
Yeah.
So it sounds like last week they were just happier with the guys that they had up, Dominique Robinson being one of those defensive ends that they had in the mix over activating Austin Booker. But Ben said Monday, when I asked him about it, that he feels he can help him soon. Yeah, I don't think you say that if you don't anticipate activating the guy. He's been full in practice. There are no injury concerns. He has not had a setback. So if this can be the week where you do that, I think that you make that move, because everybody was surprised last week when you deactivate or when you waive Tano Passignon and you expect a defensive end for a defensive end, and then all of a sudden it ends up being Travis Homer. That was a little bit of an eyebrow raiser. So if you're confident in this draft pick, which Ryan Poles in the front office should be, considering what they got out of him his rookie season and the promise of this year, then I think that it's got to be this week. Otherwise, you're running into the risk of not being able to have him at all this season.
Yeah. Our defensive backfield's been beat up this year. I saw Wright leave the game last week. I saw Stevenson have a little bit of a ding. Are we going to be at full-fledged, and is everybody going to be healthy this week?
So Stevenson's the one to keep an eye on, because Ben didn't really give a clear answer on him and on Cole Kmet. He kind of grouped both of them in, saying day-to-day, but could also be week-to-week. So you leave your options open and cover all your bases to determine whether he'll play. But that shoulder injury that knocked him out, I don't know, watching it back and just kind of watching the sequence after that, I felt like they held their own. Certainly in the takeaway department they did. But that's the good thing about having a guy like Kyler Gordon, who can play not only the nickel, but can play a little bit of outside corner if you need him, if Stevenson can't go this week. And the fact that week to week was thrown out does make me think maybe it is something that isn't going to be cleared up by the Friday final injury report. But that's one that I think you could get by with, even though they have been really beat up back there, because Nashawn finished the game. So that was a promising sign. And, the depth that you have, it's not tested depth with the likes of Jalen Jones back there. But I do think it's a good spot to be in, knowing that they didn't really miss a beat after Stevenson went out.
What's happening with the kicker situation, and are they getting to a point where they have to make a decision on Moody? Because if I understand it correctly, they're using a provision to kind of bring him off the practice squad in an emergency situation, but you only get a handful of those throughout the course of the season. Is that right, Courtney?
Yeah. So you have to eventually sign him to the active roster, and it's how do you not at this point?
I don't know.
I know last week when they were talking about Cairo Santos, he's our kicker when he's healthy, but he hasn't been healthy. Like, Moody's done everything that's been asked of him. He's the unsung hero of this team, not only for what he did against Washington, but then to kick 4 field goals last week. I think it's more of a challenge to figure out what you do there. If you're so dead set on Cairo Santos, you believe in him, you sign him to the contract. Granted, I don't believe he has any guaranteed money left after this year, but in the short term, how do you not ride with the guy who hasn't had any issues? Kicking at Soldier Field, kicking in the elements elsewhere, hasn't had any field goals blocked since he had the one blocked when against Washington. He was 4 or 5 that night. But we don't have the same questions about leg strength, and granted, it is a small sample size, but he's doing exactly what you brought him in here to do, the hope that he would be able to revitalize his career, just kind of reset after that tough start he had against Seattle when he was with the 49ers. But I think it's more of a challenge now if Cairo, if he's able to go this week, do they have to roll the dice? Because you're not carrying 2 kickers on the active roster.
No.
Like, that's not a smart use of your 53. So they will definitely have a decision to make. And I think it's a harder one than maybe they want to put out there.
Okay, they were 4-2 last year. We know what happened. What's Coach Ditka say about the past, Yurko? History?
Cowards and losers.
Cowards and losers. Okay, we don't have to look back too much, I guess. We know it is what it is. Why is it different this year? And is this team starting to take on the feel a little bit more that, they can hang around in the playoff picture for the coming months in the NFC?
Well, they don't feel like frauds. Last year, it felt fraudulent. It felt like a house of cards because by the time they were 4-2, they had already had a lot of issues with the offense to where the players called out the offensive coordinator, had a meeting with him. The offensive coordinator was very clearly shook and questioning himself and his play calling. I mean, you saw it from a very visible thing of when he's holding the play sheet and his hand is shaking during games to the indecisiveness of how he called games. And it took one thing that shattered everything. Like the house of cards fell down because there was no solid foundation. This feels like there's more of a solid foundation, and I think it's okay for Bears fans who are gun shy to buy in a little bit more to this 4-2. I understand a lot of people are not sold on the quarterback yet, and that's fine. But there's other elements of this team, this defense that's not passive in situations where late in games they need to hold off an opponent. They attack, they go after their opponent. This offense has found a way that when the quarterback play is up and down, that doesn't destroy the game plan. And that's coaching.
Yeah.
Like, they have competent coaches who I think the players have really bought into that when they're in tight situations, they're going to have a plan to follow because the coaches know how to navigate that better than the last staff. So that to me is why 4-2 is a different 4-2 feel, because they didn't go through the turmoil that they went through last year en route to 4-2. I mean, yeah, they lost 52-21 in Detroit, but the defenses looked completely different from that point. So I think you can see the in-season improvement week to week has actually panned out, and it doesn't feel like this is something that could tip one way and then completely torpedo the season like last year did.
All right, summed up well. Anything else we should know for Week 8?
Yeah, I think that, keep an eye on, the Drew Dahlman thing's interesting because the cadence issues have been problematic the last 2 weeks, and he said that there was a technique issue with himself that he needs to fix. Now, he wouldn't really go into detail when I asked him about that, but it's something that it's weird that it popped up week 6, week 7,
Yeah.
and it hadn't been an issue before then. So I'm really curious to see how they address it, how they diagnose what the problem is, to make sure that they don't squander 2 opportunities. And those are golden opportunities for them to score touchdowns. They were near the goal line.
Yeah.
And the first time a false start has ever been a good thing is when it saved them and gave them an opportunity to kick the field goal. But they can't have that going forward. Like, you spent a lot of money on Drew Dahlman in free agency, and maybe it's not all on him. I think that Ben Johnson tried to shield Caleb Williams from that a little bit. Maybe the cadence issues are with the quarterback, and I'll be really curious to see how he has diagnosed it after watching back the film of the game this past weekend. But it's certainly something that was, with all the other pre-snap penalty stuff, that's one that was a little surprising to see pop up the last 2 games.
Good stuff, Courtney. Thank you.